What is a monster? That is the question the author Walter Dean Myers, in his novel Monster, is asking his readers to consider about. A 16-year-old Steve Harmon, who is accused being a suspect of murder in Harlem at a drugstore scene. He finds out through his own experience in the trial who he really is, as he writes his story in a journal. In the climatic scene, when Steve wins his case, Steve spreads his arms to hug O'Brien, but she stiffens and turns to pick up her papers from the table before them. But wait, Steve won his case. A jury found him innocent, so why does Meyer characterize him as a monster? Before we can answer why Steve is a monster, we must first define what makes someone a monster. 1. Someone has the potential to be a monster when they are conscious of doing something they know is bad. Example, stealing, killing, threats, anything a person recommends as bad, careless, miserable, or awful. Even criminals are visible of knowing what they're doing is, well, bad. Another potential sign of being a monster is when someone's following into the footsteps of another monster, just to prove something to a person or to fit in and get friends. Teens do that on a daily basis, willing to, for example, smoke and do drugs just for even one friend. The path to becoming a monster is built upon the willingness to use a lie that you suddenly don't know who you are, using excuse that you are a good person when it's the opposite. You are a monster. Deep inside, no one is innocent. The final trait that makes someone a monster is when a person who is selfish is willing to lie to get themselves in a good position. Now that we have defined what makes someone a monster, let's use our definition to analyze why Meyer thinks Steve is a monster. Steve is indeed conscious of doing something he knew is visibly wrong. For example, in page 128, he says, "I think about him lying there, knowing he was going to die. I wonder if it hurt much. I can see me at the moment, just when Mr. Nesbitt knew he was going to die, walking down the street, trying to make my mind a blank screen." Steve knew what was happening at the drugstore, but decided not to think about it, what he was witnessing, what happened. Steve also showed that he followed into the footsteps of another monster. For example, in page 96, Steve admits that he wanted to be tough like King. He says, "All the times I had looked at him and wanted to be tough like him." There's a famous Spanish quote that states, "Tell me who you run with and it tells me who you are." Steve clearly demonstrates that he is willing to use a lie. For example, in page 220, it says Steve's cellmates have a conversation about testifying in court. One of them says, "When you got in the system, it ain't time to get all holy. You in the system, you needs to get out of the system." Also, in page 223, Steve is testifying in court. He asked if he discussed with anyone that you would be a lookout or that you would check out the store. He replies, "No, I did not." Steve needed to lie to get himself in a good position. Finally, Steve is selfish. In page 90, his journal entry said, "I think about myself so much, about what's going to happen to me and all, that I don't think about my folks that much." Harmon's dad had very high standards for him to live a good life, go to college, but right now he's in jail behind bars. And his parents are visiting him, but all he's thinking about is a way to get out of jail. What I learned from this book is that just because you didn't shoot the gun doesn't mean you weren't a part of an important role. For example, if Steve wasn't there for a lookout, any police would have came and stopped the murder from happening.